Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. As you can see behind me, it is a dreary, rainy day today. So from the shelter of my garage, I'm just going to film a quick little video today. I'm going to fill you in on an experiment that I'm trying. We're actually going to try this experiment together. Today I'm going to be making compost tea. Now I'm going to be sharing with you what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But this isn't necessarily going to be a real how-to video because this is not something I'm an expert in. This is something I'm learning. And I thought that you may be interested in coming along with me and learning with me. So for my compost tea project today, I'm going to need a 5-gallon bucket. This is a 5-gallon food grade bucket. I just bought this locally. I don't remember, maybe Walmart or Home Depot or someplace like that. I have some fish emulsion fertilizer, molasses. I have a pump sprayer, which I actually am not going to use today, but I'll use this for the finished compost tea. I have a little air pump, and then I got this set of tubing, which comes with an air stone bubbler and a valve and a few things like that. So this will be my second time making compost tea. I just tried it out once a few weeks ago, and I could not believe how easy it was. So I'm planning to give it another try. I will say, this time I am planning to put my compost in this mesh bag while it brews. Last time I just put the compost directly in the bucket. And while that worked perfectly fine for making the tea, it made it a little bit difficult to distribute the finished tea to the garden. Last time I just put it in a watering can and basically watered it on the roots of the plant. This time I'm experimenting with this pump sprayer, and I'm going to try to use it as more of a foliar spray. Now, compost tea, as I said, I'm not an expert in this, but the idea behind compost tea is that compost is this amazing substance that basically nature makes when it breaks down organic materials. And what happens is that material is broken down by beneficial microorganisms in the soil. And those microorganisms, compost has nutrients in it. It works as a fertilizer as well. But I think one of the primary benefits of adding compost to your garden is that you're really enriching the microbiome of your soil. You're basically adding to the beneficial microbes that live in your soil that help maintain your plant's health. And that is basically the point of compost tea, to basically encourage a really rapid development of those microorganisms, in this bucket here. Compost tea, depending on the type you're making, can take just a day to a couple days to make. It's really fast. So this can be a great way to really give your garden a health boost. My goal, which is, as I said, this is experimental. I don't have any significant experience with this. But what I'm experimenting with and hoping to accomplish by using this compost tea as a foliar spray, that I'm hoping will help to kind of combat some of the foliar diseases that I'm starting to see in my garden. As the season goes on, especially this summer, we've had a very humid summer. We've had a significant amount of rain. Certain plants in the garden tend to kind of succumb to disease, which can definitely impact the plant health and impact the yield of the garden. So I'm hoping that by spraying compost tea directly on the foliage, I will be able to help minimize that damage. I did mention that there are a couple types of compost tea or a couple approaches to making it, and they can take 24 hours to slightly longer depending on the type. One other thing that can impact the type of compost tea that you're making is the additives that you add to it. So according to what I have read and researched, it sounds like the way you make your compost tea can basically change the composition of the microbiome in that compost tea. So you can make a more beneficial bacterial-based compost tea, or you can make a more beneficial fungal-based compost tea. And again, from what I've read, it sounds like, for the most part, for growing annual plants that you're going to replace and replenish every year, basically grow from scratch every year, you want a more bacterial-based compost tea, which is what I'm going for today, because this is for my vegetable garden, which is made up of primarily annual plants that get replaced each year. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So the bacterial compost tea is the one that you want to let sit for only 24 hours, makes it nice and quick. And molasses is a really good addition to that. It's basically a feed and nutrient source for those beneficial bacteria. So by adding it to my compost tea, I'm going to allow the bacteria to increase at a much faster rate. Now, again, from what I've read, if you're making a more fungal-based compost tea, you want to add fish fertilizer. Now, the focus of my compost tea is going to be more bacterial than fungal, But I am still going to go ahead and add just a little splash of this fish fertilizer as well, because I figure, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, if you have a lot of experience, if I'm wrong, go ahead and let me know, because as I said, I'm just learning. But I figure it's not going to hurt anything, because a little bit of beneficial fungi in the compost tea, I imagine, will be beneficial as well. And while the plants will be getting a very small amount of this fish fertilizer, that fertilizer itself is really beneficial for plants. So I am going to use both in this bucket. So I'm going to start by going out in the rain. I'm going to fill up probably a couple inches in the bottom of this bucket with water from my hose. And I'm going to then incorporate just, about a teaspoon to slightly over a teaspoon of each, the molasses and the fish fertilizer, and get incorporated before we go on to the next step. So I'm just going to put in here a little glug of molasses, aiming for about a teaspoon or so. You can see that in there. I didn't add very much at all. And I'm going to try to do about the same of this fish fertilizer. So, as you can see, I'm not being all that precise. I'm just going to get this mixed up and then we'll add our compost. Now I'm going to have to once again brave the rain and head out to my compost pile in my woods. I'm going to grab maybe 1 or 2 shovelfuls of my homemade finished compost and add it into this bag here. I will meet you back here. I'm not going to take my camera out in that rain, so I'll meet you back here when I come back with the compost. I'm back. I grabbed the compost. Before we actually add this into our bucket, I'm going to go ahead and set up the air pump. The air pump is a really essential part of compost tea because one characteristic of the beneficial microbes that we're trying to encourage is that they live in an aerobic environment. So that means an environment that is oxygen rich. If we don't add an air pump to basically oxygenate our water, what's going to happen is it will become an anaerobic environment, which basically means it will be absent oxygen. And that leads to the growth of different microorganisms, not the type that we want in our compost. So admittedly, I was a little bit intimidated by the idea of getting an air pump in this whole setup when I first decided to try compost tea. I put it off for a little while just because I wasn't really sure what I was doing. And let this be a lesson to you guys. Learn from my mistake. I just got it. At some point, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. And it was so easy. It took me like a minute or two to set up the pump. And I was like, I can't believe I haven't been doing this all along. So I'm just going to show you the pump setup that I have. I'll link it. I just bought it on Amazon. So I'll link it in the video description in case you're interested in getting it. It wasn't very expensive. I think it was maybe $5 or $10. So this is the little air pump that I have. Just came in this little box here. As I said, I got it on Amazon, so I can include that link below. But you could probably find this or something really similar at any kind of aquarium or pet store, that type of thing too. Now, what I did find, I purchased the pump initially, and I didn't realize that I had to buy an extra set to go with it. So I did have to make an additional purchase, which again was only a few dollars, of all this extra tubing, which also included this valve here and this air stone bubbler. So overall, this was it was definitely under $15 for all of it. I can't remember exactly. So, and it's very, very easy to use. So the pump came with these directions here, which will give you indications of basically how to cut your tubing and which way this little valve should face. So very, very easy. So when you set your compost tea up, you're going to want the bucket to sit on a level surface, and then you're going to want this pump to sit somewhere above it. So that is going to influence the length that you cut your tubing to. So you're basically just going to take this pump here. One end of it has the power cord, which you are going to need to do this close to a power source. The other end of it attaches to this tube. So you can see I cut it to this length. And then you just take the little valve and just insert it right into the end of the tube. You want the arrow to be pointing towards basically what will ultimately be towards the bubbling stone, because the oxygen is going to come from this pump. The valve is going to direct it in the right direction, and then you're going to attach this to the other length of cord here into this bubbling stone, which will sit in the compost tea as it brews. So please have grace with me for my messy garage. We use this for a lot of storage, plus, as you can see, all my garlic is curing here on this box. So my compost tea is going to brew in here, and I am going to set the pump up here so it's on an elevated surface, and I basically want the stone to hang down into the compost tea. Now you can see it doesn't reach the water level yet, but once I fill this up, it will. So we are just going to get this all situated and then go ahead and add the compost. So I'm basically just going to take my mesh bag of compost and tie it around the handle to hold it in place as it brews. So here's our bag of compost all set up. I'm just going to take my hose and fill this up the rest of the way. So this is all filled up. I'm just going to move it in place. And we're going to set up our bubbler system and get this brewing. So everything's set up. I'm just going to go ahead and plug this in. And you can see, as soon as I plugged it in, this started vibrating. I could hear a sound, and you can see that it's bubbling really well. So we're going to let this brew for about 24 hours. So tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to come out here with my pump sprayer and fill that up, and I'm going to try spraying this compost tea on the foliage of my plants, and we're going to see how well they respond to it. So as I said, this is a little bit of an experiment, not something that I'm familiar with. So if you're interested in seeing the results of this experiment, check back probably on my next garden tour, I think is when I'll share how well it's working. So over the course of the next few days, next few weeks, I'm going to make several batches of this compost tea, and I'm going to spray it. You know, I'm going to concentrate on the plants that are showing signs of disease. But I'm probably going to try to spray it on other plants that are prone to disease too, even if they haven't shown any signs of it, to see if we can hopefully prevent it from starting. So this is a fun experiment. I hope that you will join me again to see the results. In the meantime, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and brewing compost tea with me on this really rainy day. I'm excited to see the results, and I hope you come back and join me again too. I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.